There comes a moment after the heartbreak, not right away, but after the noise fades, when you finally realize it's not about missing him anymore. It's about missing the version of you that existed before he broke your spirit. That's when you know it's time for something deeper than just moving on. It's time to erase him from your soul. Not in a way that denies what happened, but in a way that frees you from the invisible thread still tying you to his energy. Because here's the truth, he doesn't have to be in your life to still be in your mind. You can block his number, delete the photos, unfollow him online, and still feel his presence inside you. Still feel that ache when you hear a song, or the sting when someone says his name. That's not weakness. That's residue, the emotional fingerprints left behind by someone who once held space in your heart. But what if you could release that residue? What if you could erase his energy, not just from your phone, but from your spirit? Imagine walking through your day without the quiet weight of him in the background. Imagine waking up without that tug toward the past. That's not just healing, that's liberation. You see, erasing someone from your soul isn't about pretending they never existed. It's about reclaiming the power they once held over you. It's about cleaning out the emotional space where they used to live and filling it with peace, self-respect, and clarity. Because when someone breaks your heart, they don't just leave a void, they leave an imprint. And healing means saying, that imprint no longer defines me, so this isn't about revenge. It's not about showing him you've moved on faster, or that you're happier without him. It's about quiet strength, the kind that says, I no longer need to prove anything, because I'm finally free. And in that freedom, you rediscover something extraordinary, yourself. The real you, not the version shaped by the pain, but the one that existed before it. The one who laughed louder, dreamed bigger, and loved without fear. That's the woman you're walking back to. Because when you erase him from your soul, you're not erasing love. You're erasing the weight that love left behind. You're not losing something, you're reclaiming everything. Detaching your identity from his presence is one of the most powerful acts of emotional freedom you will ever experience. When we love someone deeply, we unconsciously begin to shape our sense of self around that person. Our moods shift depending on how they treat us. Our worth starts to feel tied to how much attention they give. Slowly, without realizing it, we start to lose the edges of who we are. The things that once made us feel confident, alive, and whole begin to fade into the background, replaced by the constant desire to be seen, chosen, and validated by them. When the relationship ends, that emotional structure collapses, and that's when the real pain begins. Because what you're grieving isn't just him, you're grieving the version of yourself that existed when he was part of your world. You're grieving the comfort of being someone's person, the identity that revolved around his approval and attention. It's not that you can't live without him, it's that you forgot how to live as you. But here's the truth, you were a whole, vibrant, extraordinary person long before he ever entered your life. You had dreams, passions, opinions, and energy that were entirely your own. Erasing him from your soul begins when you remember that truth, when you stop letting the presence or absence of someone else define your sense of self. He didn't create your light, he just stood near it for a while, and when he left, your light didn't go out, it just got buried under the dust of heartbreak. Your job now is to clear away that dust and see yourself again. It starts with awareness. Notice how often your thoughts orbit around him, what he's doing, what he's thinking, what he might feel if he saw you now. That mental space is precious energy that belongs to you. Every time you center him in your thoughts, you give away a piece of your power. So, start reclaiming it not by force, not by trying to stop thinking about him, but by gently refocusing your attention on you. What makes you feel alive? What challenges you? What excites you when no one's watching? That's where your identity lives. Detaching your identity also means releasing the version of yourself that you became to keep him. Maybe you softened your voice to avoid arguments. Maybe you dimmed your opinions to be more likable. Maybe you ignored red flags because you didn't want to lose him. Those were survival tactics, not your truth. The real you is still there beneath the compromises, beneath the fears, beneath the exhaustion of trying to be enough. The moment you stop editing yourself to fit someone else's world is the moment you begin returning home to yourself. The key is to shift your internal dialogue from who am I without him to who do I get to become now. That small change in perspective moves you from loss to possibility. Because losing him isn't the end of your story. It's the beginning of your rediscovery. Every day, you get to redefine what love means for you. Love that doesn't demand you shrink. Love that doesn't ask you to trade your peace for attention. Love that begins with self-respect. When you truly detach your identity from his presence, something beautiful happens. Your worth stops fluctuating. You stop needing anyone to remind you that you matter. You stop searching for validation in places that once left you empty. You stop asking, was I not enough? And start realizing I was too much for someone who wasn't ready. And that realization doesn't come with bitterness, it comes with peace. Because the woman who no longer ties her identity to someone else's love becomes untouchable. She doesn't chase closure, she creates it. She doesn't look back to wonder what could have been, because she's too busy becoming who she was always meant to be. When you detach your identity from his presence, you don't lose him. You lose the illusion that you ever needed him to be whole. And in that moment, you finally remember who you are: powerful, complete, and enough, all on your own. One of the hardest truths to accept after a breakup is that what you miss the most might not even be real. When we fall in love, especially with someone who made us feel seen or desired in ways we'd never experienced before, our minds start creating an emotional highlight reel. We remember the laughter, the chemistry, the butterflies, every moment that made us feel alive. But what we rarely hold on to with the same intensity are the nights we cried, the times we felt unappreciated, or the quiet ways we were slowly losing ourselves. The human heart is nostalgic. It clings to the moments that felt magical and conveniently filters out the parts that hurt. That's why healing feels so confusing, because often you're grieving the fantasy, not the reality. Romanticizing what was never real is a form of emotional self-sabotage. It keeps you tied to a version of the relationship that existed only in your imagination. You start believing that he was the one, that the connection you shared was irreplaceable, that what you had was too special to lose. But love without consistency isn't love, it's longing. Chemistry without respect isn't connection, it's chaos. When you replay only the good parts, you're reinforcing the illusion that something beautiful was stolen from you, when in truth, what you lost might have never truly existed in the way you remember. You see, when we care deeply, we don't just fall in love with the person, we fall in love with their potential. We fall in love with the idea of who they could become, the relationship we could build, the version of ourselves we could be in their world. And when it ends, we don't just mourn the person, we mourn the dream, the us, that never fully happened. The future we imagined, that's why it's so painful, but that's also why clarity is essential. Because if you keep replaying the illusion, you'll stay emotionally attached to something that was never built to last. It takes courage to stop romanticizing someone who gave you mixed signals, to stop glamorizing a relationship that often left you anxious or unsure. But emotional freedom begins with honesty. Ask yourself, if I take away the chemistry, the highs, the physical connection, what was left? Did I feel safe? Did I feel valued? Did I feel seen for who I truly am? More often than not, the answer is no. And that realization doesn't mean what you had was meaningless. It just means it was incomplete. It means you were trying to build something stable on temporary moments of connection. When you stop romanticizing what was never real, you stop chasing closure that doesn't exist. You stop waiting for him to become the version of himself he never was. You stop rewriting history to justify staying emotionally stuck. Instead, you start grounding yourself in truth. You see the situation for what it was, not what you hoped it could be. That's not bitterness, that's self-respect. Because the more you glorify the illusion, the more power it has to haunt you. But the moment you tell yourself the truth, that he wasn't the person you needed, that the love you imagined was mostly projection, you begin to reclaim your emotional energy. And that's when healing truly begins. You realize that your heart wasn't wrong for loving, but your hope kept holding onto a story that wasn't real anymore. You realize that you didn't lose your soulmate, you lost your fantasy, and there's freedom in that truth. Because once you stop romanticizing the illusion, you create space for something genuine to find you, something that doesn't confuse you, doesn't drain you, doesn't make you question your worth. You start to see love differently. You stop craving intensity and start craving peace. You stop chasing validation and start craving understanding. You stop needing someone to prove you're lovable because you already know you are, and that's the shift from illusion to reality, from pain to power. Because when you finally stop romanticizing what was never real, you don't just erase him from your soul, you erase the version of yourself that believed she needed his love to feel whole. Withdrawing your emotional investment from someone is one of the most empowering yet difficult things you'll ever do. Because love isn't just about what you feel, it's about where you place your energy. For so long, you've been emotionally funding a connection that no longer exists. You've been feeding thoughts of him, replaying memories, wondering what he's doing, or hoping he still thinks about you. That energy, that focus, that emotional bandwidth, it all belongs to you. Yet it's being spent on someone who's no longer contributing to your peace. Every time you give him space in your thoughts, you're investing in something that has already ended. The truth is, healing isn't about deleting someone from your life. It's about taking your energy back from the places you left it. Because when a relationship ends, the emotional attachment doesn't disappear instantly. It lingers. It stays in the small things, in songs, habits, routines, even in your daydreams. You might not text him anymore, but emotionally, he's still costing you. You're still checking his social media to see if he misses you. You're still analyzing what went wrong. You're still imagining conversations you'll never have. And each of those thoughts is like a tiny thread keeping you tied to something that's no longer real. To withdraw your emotional investment, you have to start noticing where your attention goes. Every time you think of him, pause and ask yourself, what is this thought giving me? Does it bring peace or pain? Does it move me forward or pull me backward? That awareness is where detachment begins. You can't control when he crosses your mind, but you can control how long you entertain the thought. You can decide to redirect that energy towards something that feeds you instead of draining you. It's not easy at first, because emotional detachment feels like withdrawal. You were once addicted to the rush of hearing from him, the comfort of being wanted, the security of belonging to something familiar. When you take that away, there's an emptiness, a silence that feels unbearable. But that silence isn't emptiness, it's space. It's the space where your healing begins to breathe. It's where your energy begins to come home. You're not losing connection, you're reclaiming presence. You're no longer scattering your emotions across memories that don't serve you. You're consolidating your power. One of the biggest reasons people stay stuck is because they confuse emotional loyalty with love. You can love someone and still know they're not meant to stay in your life. You can care deeply and still choose yourself. Withdrawing your emotional investment doesn't mean you're cold. It means you're wise enough to stop pouring into something that gives you nothing back. It's realizing that your emotions are currency and you deserve to spend them on things that grow you, not things that deplete you. As you pull that energy back, something incredible happens. You start to feel lighter. You begin to remember what it feels like to have emotional space again. You find that the thoughts that once consumed you no longer have the same grip. It's not that he disappears overnight, but his presence in your mind begins to fade because you've stopped feeding it. Every moment you redirect your focus toward your goals, your peace, your growth is a moment you take back control. This is what it truly means to erase someone from your soul, not by force, but by choice. You stop giving them the emotional access they no longer earn. You stop letting their absence dictate your energy. You stop replaying conversations that ended long ago. Because every time you choose yourself over the memory of him, you're rewriting the narrative. You're shifting from attachment to alignment. And eventually, there comes a day when you wake up and realize you haven't thought about him in weeks. You can hear his name and feel nothing. You can remember the story without reliving the pain. That's when you know your energy is fully yours again. You didn't erase him with hate, you erased him with healing. You didn't forget him, you simply outgrew the version of yourself that needed him to feel whole. Forgiveness is one of the most misunderstood parts of healing. People often think it means excusing someone's behavior or pretending it didn't hurt, but real forgiveness isn't about him, it's about you. It's about reclaiming your peace from the grip of resentment. Because when you hold on to anger, when you replay the betrayal or the disappointment over and over again, you're not punishing him, you're punishing yourself. You're keeping the wound open, feeding it with thoughts that keep you stuck in the past. Forgiveness isn't saying what he did was okay. It's saying, I refuse to let this pain define me anymore. When you've been deeply hurt, it's natural to want justice. You want him to understand what he did, to regret it, to feel what you felt. You want an apology that makes the pain make sense, but sometimes that apology never comes. Sometimes the closure you crave doesn't arrive in the way you imagined. And if you wait for it, you give him control over your healing. You allow his silence to dictate your peace. Forgiveness is the moment you take that control back. It's when you stop waiting for him to make things right and start choosing to make things right within yourself. Letting go of anger doesn't mean you're weak. It doesn't mean you're okay with what happened. It means you're tired of carrying the emotional weight of something you didn't cause. Anger feels powerful at first. It gives you a sense of strength, like you're holding on to something important. But over time, it becomes poison. It seeps into your thoughts, your mood, your energy. It hardens your heart. And the longer you hold it, the more it controls you. Forgiveness is the detox, the release that allows your heart to breathe again. Forgiving him is not for his benefit, it's for yours. You're not letting him off the hook. You're removing the hook from yourself. You're saying, I deserve peace more than I deserve revenge. And that doesn't mean you invite him back into your life. It doesn't mean you pretend everything is fine. It means you've made peace with the fact that the past can't be changed, but your future doesn't have to be haunted by it. You're no longer carrying the story like a wound. You're carrying it like wisdom. When you forgive, you free yourself from the emotional loop that keeps you stuck. You stop trying to rewrite history. You stop expecting the person who broke you to be the one who heals you. That's the shift, realizing that your healing has nothing to do with him. It's an inside job, and once you make that decision, forgiveness becomes less about words and more about energy. You can feel the weight lifting, the grip loosening. You can talk about what happened without bitterness in your voice. You stop needing to win the story. You've already won because you've moved on. Forgiveness doesn't happen overnight. It's a process of softening, not toward him, but toward yourself. It's looking at your pain and saying, I'm allowed to be free now. It's realizing that holding on doesn't protect you. It only prolongs your suffering. Sometimes you'll have to forgive him 100 times before it fully sticks, but each time you do, the hold weakens a little more. Each time you reclaim a bit more peace. And one day, you wake up and realize that his name doesn't trigger you anymore. The story doesn't sting the same way. You can think about it without emotion because you've extracted the lesson and released the rest. That's forgiveness, not erasing the past, but erasing its power over you. Because when you forgive, you don't lose power, you gain it. You take back the emotional energy that was once tangled up in pain and redirect it into your future. You walk lighter, you breathe easier, you love deeper. You're no longer defined by what someone did to you. You're defined by how gracefully you rose beyond it. And that's when you've truly erased him from your soul, not because you forgot, but because you finally remembered your peace mattered more. When you love someone deeply, it's easy to lose parts of yourself along the way. You give so much, your time, your energy, your emotions, that before you realize it, you start adjusting who you are to fit who they need you to be. You silence your opinions to avoid arguments. You shrink your dreams to make the relationship work. You begin to measure your worth by how happy they are with you. And slowly, piece by piece, you abandon the very parts of yourself that made you vibrant in the first place. When it ends, that's why you feel empty, not just because they're gone, but because you've become disconnected from yourself. Erasing him from your soul means rebuilding those parts of you that you left behind. It's not just about moving on, it's about reuniting with the version of you who used to laugh loudly, dream freely, and love without fear. That version of you didn't disappear, she's waiting for you underneath the heartbreak. You find her again in small ways, in the music you used to love before he influenced your taste, in the friendships you neglected, in the passions you put on hold. Every act of self-care, every boundary you set, every dream you pick back up is a step toward her. Sometimes healing feels lonely, but it's also sacred. It's the process of gathering all the pieces of yourself you gave away and saying, "You belong to me again." Maybe you used to be spontaneous, adventurous, confident, and over time, you forgot that. Now is the time to rebuild that confidence, not by seeking validation from someone else, but by showing up for yourself. Go to places that make you feel alive. Spend time doing things that remind you how powerful it feels to rely on yourself. Rebuilding isn't about replacing what was lost. It's about remembering what was always there. The truth is, love shouldn't require you to abandon yourself. The right kind of love expands you. It doesn't shrink you. But when you've been through a relationship that demanded pieces of your identity as payment for affection, you start to believe that's just how love works. It's not. Real love doesn't ask you to give up your fire, it celebrates it. So now, as you rebuild, your goal isn't to become the person you were before him, but a wiser, stronger version of yourself, one who knows how to love without losing her identity. Start by asking yourself, what did I stop doing because of him? What parts of myself did I suppress to make the relationship feel safe? And what would it look like to bring those parts back? Maybe it's signing up for that class you always wanted to take. Maybe it's reconnecting with old friends, or maybe it's just learning to enjoy your own company again. Healing doesn't have to be loud or dramatic. Sometimes it's just you, alone in your space, remembering how to love being in your own energy. The beauty of rebuilding yourself after love is that you begin to see your own power clearly. You realize that the things you thought you needed from him, validation, comfort, affection, were things you were always capable of giving yourself. You start speaking to yourself kindly. You start dressing for yourself, living for yourself, choosing for yourself. You stop asking, would he like this? And start asking, does this make me happy? That's how you reclaim your identity, by making your life revolve around your peace again, not someone else's approval. And one day you'll look back and realize that the person you were when he left isn't the person you are anymore. You'll see how much you've grown, how much you've rebuilt, and how much stronger your boundaries have become. The version of you that once broke trying to hold onto him will smile because she'll finally understand. She didn't lose herself forever. She just needed time to remember who she's always been. When you rebuild the parts of yourself you abandoned for love, you don't just heal, you transform. You no longer chase people to feel complete because you've learned that completeness comes from within. You no longer beg to be seen because you see yourself. You no longer fear being alone because you've realized that solitude isn't loneliness, it's your sanctuary. And that's the moment you know you've erased him from your soul, not because you forgot him, but because you found yourself again. True healing happens in silence. It's not loud, it's not dramatic, and it doesn't need an audience. It's that quiet, sacred space where you stop chasing closure and start creating peace. It's when you no longer need to talk about what happened every day because it doesn't control your thoughts anymore. You don't wake up with anger, you don't fall asleep with pain. You simply exist without the constant pull of what once was. That's when you know you've erased him from your soul, when the noise of the past no longer echoes inside you. Healing in silence doesn't mean suppressing your feelings. It means processing them privately at your own pace without the need to explain yourself to the world. It's about detaching from the drama that once consumed you. You stop checking his social media. You stop replaying conversations in your head. You stop needing to prove that you're over him, because real healing isn't about showing the world how strong you are. It's about genuinely becoming strong within yourself. You stop trying to convince anyone, including yourself, that you're fine. You simply are. In the quiet, you begin to see things more clearly. You start to understand that peace doesn't come from answers. It comes from acceptance. You may never know why he changed, why he left, or why he couldn't love you the way you needed. But you stop needing those answers to move forward. You realize that closure isn't something he gives you with an apology. It's something you give yourself by deciding to stop reliving the pain. The more you sit in that quiet space, the more your soul begins to soften. You start to feel free again, light again, grounded again. Silence also teaches you the art of self-control. You stop reacting to triggers, stop reaching out in moments of weakness, stop allowing your emotions to dictate your behavior. Instead, you learn to observe them, to breathe through them, to let them pass without judgment. Every time you choose calm over chaos, you take back your power. Every time you resist the urge to reopen a closed chapter, you strengthen your peace. That's what healing in silence looks like, not ignoring your emotions, but mastering them. When you finally step back and let go, you realize how much energy you've been giving to things that don't deserve it. You've been trying to fix someone who wasn't willing to meet you halfway. You've been trying to make sense of something that wasn't meant to make sense. And in that realization, you stop trying, you let life flow again, you stop fighting to control what's already gone and start creating space for what's meant to come next. The silence becomes comforting instead of heavy. It becomes your new strength, your safe place. There will come a day when you think of him and there's no rush of emotion, no bitterness, no sadness. You'll remember, but it won't hurt. You'll see it for what it was, a chapter, not your story. You'll realize that you didn't need revenge or validation. You just needed peace. And that peace came when you stopped talking about it and started living again. That's the quiet victory of healing, when you no longer need to explain your journey, because your calm speaks louder than any words ever could. The world won't see your transformation at first. It happens behind closed doors, in tearful nights, in moments of reflection, in deep breaths taken instead of texts sent. But one day it shows It shows in the way you smile again, the way you walk without heaviness, the way you radiate peace. That's what erasing him from your soul truly looks like, not pretending it never happened, but allowing the silence to rebuild your spirit. Because the silence that once felt empty eventually becomes full, full of strength, full of wisdom, full of you. You don't need to announce that you've healed. You just start living like it. You stop being driven by pain and start being guided by peace. You stop carrying the story of what broke you and start writing the story of who you've become. And in that calm, unshakable silence, you find your true power, the kind that doesn't shout or prove, but simply exists. That's when you've truly erased him from your soul, when you no longer need noise to prove your peace. Erasing him from your soul isn't about pretending the story never happened. It's about remembering that it no longer defines you. It's choosing peace over pain, acceptance over answers, and freedom over attachment. You're not erasing love, you're erasing the hold it had on you. You're not forgetting him, you're remembering yourself. The real victory isn't that he's gone, it's that you're finally free. Because the moment you stop fighting the past and start living in your peace, you realize something powerful. You were never truly broken, you were just being rebuilt into the strongest version of yourself.